Hey everyone, this is RVBBIT, and since the release of my Rabbit visual data boards last week, I wanted to start making more long-form videos that show building things from scratch, right? I've always been better at learning stuff from watching it be done and looking at examples rather than reading documentation or specs or something like that. So I want to do a weekly-ish series where I build some kind of dashboard with flows or ETL, whatever. We're gonna start easy this week and just do a straight-up dashboard with some basic Rabbit, background stuff and some kind of exposition around how the systems work and whatnot. But I expect it to get more complicated and more fancy as we go on. I think it's good. There's a lot more you can absorb this way than you can by just doing it on your own. And there's a lot of interesting things in this platform that I think benefit from more of a show, don't tell example. So, welcome to HareZero, kind of like zero to hero and hare for rabbits, very, very clever. Anyways, so We'll start right from the very beginning, right? So whether you download a zip file from the GitHub or if you use the Docker package, if you use the Docker package, you're already up and running. But if you download the zip, basically you're going to want to unzip it somewhere, and you'll be in this nice basic Rabbit directory. There's a shell script there called run rabbit, which runs the jar file, and you're going to run that guy, and it'll take a little while to start running and has to do a bunch of background tasks, but you'll know that it's ready when you see I have these terminal console graphs that show CPU, memory, that kind of thing. Once they show up, all the background systems should be running. So let's just give it a second here. Excuse me. Some coffee. I'm also going to try to break this video into chapters using YouTube, the YouTube chapter system, so you don't have to go through all of it. But it's going to be a long video where I do things step by step. I'm going to talk a lot. I'm going to show a lot of stuff, so feel free to skip around. Hopefully the chapters and the bookmarks will make it easier. Okay, looks like we're running. Sweet. So let's go to localhost and 8888. I might change that port number or make it configurable in the config file. Not quite sure yet, but for now, that's what it is. All right, so at first it loads this data board, Frost Terminal 2. That's just because this is what I set to have my welcome page for now. I have some messages, some links to some YouTube videos. There's this cool little menu here where you can open up different saved screens or open up their themes. Like I can switch to this theme by clicking here. I can switch to this theme by clicking here. Themes is a kind of an important thing in Rabbit because it's super flexible, super malleable. I mean, everything's a parameter, including the themes. We'll get into all of this, but for now, a lot of stuff going on here. So we have the themes. Let's do the about the default screen loading up. If I go to the config file, it's called config.edn. It's in the defs folder. There's a key here called default, and this is where you put the screen that you want to start on boot. If you can't find it, it'll just load a blank screen, but this is kind of like your start, welcome page, and you can create, whatever screen you want. And that's what your users will see when they start up the first time, if they don't have a URL. If they don't specify a screen, I should say. So, all right, let's start making something. So I'm going to use this theme. It does have a dynamic background image, but that's okay. Let us just but that shouldn't really get in our way too much. Just kind of let me make I'll make the opacity a little bit less so we can see what's going on. We'll change this to like 18. There we go. Go to refresh rate. But basically, I have this. Close this guy. Solvers. I have this solver, and a solver is basically a function that runs on a server that picks a new wallpaper from a directory every 5 minutes, right? And then once that runs, there's a color function that changes a bunch of parameters that changes the colors. And this theme I picked happens to subscribe to all that. So, like, if I were to run it manually and change the wallpaper, you can see it changed the wallpaper and it changed the theme to match the wallpaper, right? So now we have this. It's kind of cool. In a production environment, you'd use something a little more pedestrian, but this is just a fun kind of tutorial walkthrough, so all good. All right. So we have, when I hit spacebar, so a lot of the keys are very video game-ish, like spacebar, WASD, shift, tab, kind of like your left hand on the keyboard kind of thing. Anyone who's played first-person shooters will be very familiar with that kind of hand posture. So spacebar brings up this big candy bar of a editor. This is where a lot of the configuration, editing, browsing stuff happens. You can see you can make it bigger or smaller. You can hide panels to make it, wider, fatter. We can also dock it to the edges. If that's your thing. I'm actually just going to maximize this. There we go. Nothing too spectacular, but it's good to know how that works, because this is you doing a lot of toggling on and off of this guy. So we have a blank canvas. So right click creates a new block, or a new card, excuse me. And the first thing in that card by default is a view. A view is basically just a simple renderable screen. In this case, it's a DSL called Clover, which if you're a Clojure person, you'll recognize it as basically Hiccup plus Recom plus HoneySQL plus a bunch of visualization libraries that are all equally hiccupized, right? So if you don't know what any of the hell that means, don't worry. Please don't turn it off. We're going to do a lot of drag and drop stuff today, but I'm just trying to I'll get in the weeds a little bit where it makes sense. So as I right click, it picks a random quote that's completely configurable by the config file, or you can configure right click to build something, to draw something else. It doesn't matter. That's what I love about this system. It's totally hackable, totally configurable for your enterprise or your team. It can do all kinds of cool stuff. So anyways, yeah, so it has this basic rendering, a little HTML. It's got some boilerplate CSS just to make it a little extra pretty. And you can see the theme just changed again. Try doing that in your dashboard app. Kidding. We have, here's our CSS for the view. There's this button here called Scrubber. So Scrubber basically looks at the code, or the data, you should say, and says, hey, is there anything here that I understand that I can manipulate? And since Clojure is very data based, its code is data, its data is code. There's a lot of that, especially when it comes to CSS and a lot of these more configuration options. So I can hit Scrubber. I can see here there's a handful of things. This is just really handy for changing offhand things in an easy way. I can scrub the font size up and down. I can change the margins around. If there was a legit color here, I could change that. These are parameters being used. But if I had a materialized color here, like an actual hex color, then I could say, hey, all right, well, let's just make this a nice, nice blue. And again, it's just a really easy way to kind of change stuff and screw around. Like you see font weight, there's a selector here for that if your font supports it. You know, just a simple thing. So this is a view we started, but I'm not going to use this view. This is just an example. Let us erase this, and instead I'm going to use a little short code component here called webcam, and I should have permissions, and howdy. Not the best angle, but you know, hey, who needs OBS, right? When I have this data desktop thing going on here. So anyways, I thought this would make it a little more interesting. You have to look at my ugly mug too much, but all right, sweet. So what I'm going to do here is something else kind of cool. As you can see in our little, so here's like kind of the code pane, here's like the preview pane. You can see HareVBBIT is selected because that's the view I created and then wiped out to put this one there. And there's this other little tab here with asterisks, keyword asterisks. So if I go to that, it shows the entire source, you could call it, of this block card. Like this is like the map, right? Height, width, root, which is like the X and Y, the name of the tab it's in, turquoise B, which is up here, which is just, you know, randomly generated when I create one. The name of the block, let's make this, you know, webcam fun. Now, these are just things that help identify stuff. For views, it has one view, HareVBBIT, the one we created, and the contents of that view is webcam. And if I went to the view itself, you'd see just the code of that, right? And queries, there's no queries. I'm going to add an icon just because it's fun for this example. And you can see I use this folder assets. Now this is kind of important because if we go to the directory of where we launched this from, there's a folder in here called assets. And this is important because it's like it's the user content folder, right? So stuff that you dump here is accessible from the web UI, which is important for downloading files, or using images, or let's say you have some side process that dumps out a file and you want it to be used in dashboards or wherever. This is where you put it. You know, you make your own directory structure, whatever. This will be accessible as assets from the root of the web, and that's kind of important. So I put assets, ryrobes.jpg. It's just that goofy Twitter picture. I did that because now we have the metadata of the assets, and if I minimize this, again, you know, data desktop and all that, if I minimize it, you'll see it's probably really tiny, but you can see down here webcam fun and then my little stupid head. So that's kind of the icon. And I can also iconize any view by clicking this button, which again turns it into an icon with the icon image if you have one. And then by double clicking this, it launches what was there. And what's kind of cool about that is, let's say this was some type of query or a nested tab or something. You could imagine creating interesting dashboard concepts that have a bunch of things that are kind of like pre-rendered and hidden but then called out, and it acts just like an icon desktop where it spawns a new thing when you click on it. And you know, if I right click on it to get rid of the iconization, it goes away, and now we have two Ryans. Anyways, so this is the original one. So just kind of an interesting thing. I don't expect it being used a lot, but in situations where it's useful, it exists, right? Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pin this. So now we have it pinned to all tabs. So I create a new tab. So let's say I create a new tab and I have some stuff going on here. I have some random views, and then I switch over this view to card. Sorry, I'm going through a terminology change lately with the namings of stuff. It was blocks and now they're cards, and my brain is still not caught up yet. So this will stay, and that's especially cool when you want to minimize something and have it down here. And regardless of what you're working on or looking at, it's always kind of available. And this is cool for making like mini apps. You know, you can have an entire tab in a view minimized and available through all the other tabs. In one of my other examples, I had these Philips Hue lights. I have a little mini app, a mini Rabbit app that talks to a flow to hit the REST API and change them, and I have a little control panel with sliders and stuff for the colors, and it's just, kind of cool. And it exists on the screen on the dashboard as its own kind of thing. So anyways, a little bit of a background there. So we'll erase all these. I don't know why my title bars are gray, but it's an alpha and we're doing it live, so hey. All right, so back to the editor. So I want to make a simple dashboard based on Bigfoot data. You've probably seen some of my Bigfoot sample stuff. It's a data set that is shipped with Rabbit. It's a SQLite database. It's not that big, but I have that. I have some Boston crime data. I have some UFO information and some Metallica show data that I scrape. Just kind of fun little data sets that are easy to kind of get into. Future episodes of this, I'll be doing real like ETL and pulling stuff and doing more businessy things. Tableau has a data set called Superset that I want to, not Superset, Superset. That's called Superstore that I want to do some dashboards on, just because it's something that people have done a lot of demos on and done a lot of things with, and I want to show what I can do with this platform with it. So, but today we're doing Bigfoot stuff. So I go to my editor bar here. As you can see, I have lists of databases, or a list of connections, excuse me. And these connections there's a connections folder. Let me just go here, actually. Go to Assets. And in the root of your Rabbit installation, there's a connections folder. And it has these EDN files in it. And all that is a JDBC connection. If I go to this one, you can see it's just JDBC URL. And this one goes to a SQLite file. I have other examples, like here's ClickHouse, DuckDB, MySQL, Oracle, SQL Server, Vertica, lots of different ones. And there's also some connection pooling keys in here, but it's basically a JDBC connection. So pretty straightforward. Anything you put in here, it will connect to. And if I were to add a new one right now, it would connect, and as soon as the server sees it, it would go and pull its metadata and do some stuff there. But when we booted, it scraped the metadata for all the databases that exist, and that includes the Bigfoot data, which is why it shows up here. So we select the connection ID, Bigfoot UFOs, which is the same as the file was named. And we have the tables, by county, locations. Here's the UFO tables. I'm going to go to this Bigfoot settings table. You can see all the fields. Now I could grab individual fields and drag them onto the desktop and start doing that. And that's kind of like what you do in like a Superset or a Tableau or like Power BI-ish, where you look at the metadata and you pull little things off. But I kind of like this concept of like a reverse, like a kind of like a cutting board methodology, where think about if you have a new job and you connect to your SQL client and you have a new data source available, what are you going to do? Like, all right, you're going to look at the metadata, and then you're going to start like tasting it, right? Select all from this, limit 10, select all from that, limit 10. I'm just kind of looking at it. And I kind of like wanted to reproduce that feel with this, right? So just grab the whole table, throw the table on the canvas. So now we have the whole table. Let's hide this, and I can kind of like look at what the fields are. And okay, I can see the data type, I can see the data, and then I can start cutting it up from here. I can say, all right, well, let's drag class out. Let's drag out. Was there a county? Maybe I want to go find where's state. I'm going to drag state. I'm going to add that to my county group by, and now I have county and state and row count, and then I can even say, hey, like I want to drag row count out on its own, and that'll be a sum of this table, which is an aggregation of this table. I can create a new block over here, and then drag out the query itself and say, give me a row count here. Again, pretty straightforward, but these are like a lot of things that you would just normally do, like tasting a field, or tasting a table or a database, a new connection. So that's kind of cool. What's also cool about this, especially, is that these blocks, as you can see, I have this block selected. You can see downstream, downstream, downstream. They are subqueries, or excuse me, this main block is a subquery of all these other ones. In fact, this count is a count of this table, and that's important because by keeping the lineage in check, we can make sure that our filter actions and all the things we do with the tables are more understandable, right? Like simple things. If I click on this, you can see county is highlighted and state is highlighted because those are the two fields that I'm using from that table. Just if I click on row count sum, I can see row count is lit up because that's the field I'm using there. If I were to hit L to show the lineage lines of these tables, it gets even more pronounced. So if I hit L, we can see that these are the children of this table, and this is the child of this table, and on and on. Kind of a, nothing insane, but it can be really handy when you're trying to figure out, like, when you have cascading reactions and parameters, like, it's really good to know, like, what is talking to what and what is related to what. So again, a really underrated thing that I think more tools should use. But that being said, okay, so we've dragged some stuff out, we've done some stuff, I'm not going to use any of this for the dashboard, but just kind of as an example. So let's do this. Let's get rid of these. I drew out kind of what I wanted to make over here. Again, you're not going to be able to see this, and it's a garbage drawing anyways, but just to get an idea of what I wanted to put together, what we'll do is we'll keep this as the main detail table. Let me drag it out a little bit more. Let me just minimize this so I can take a drink real quick. Okay, so the first thing in my drawing is I want to get a list of states to put on the left-hand side. Well, first let's do a title. All right, I'm going to make a new view here, and I'm going to, I don't know why that title bar is gray. Let me change the theme real quick and see what the hell the deal is. It's very weird. Anyways, we'll use this theme for a while. All right, so we're gonna edit this, and we're gonna say. Settings in the USA. Make this a little bigger. Cool. Notice the rounded borders. I have this setting called sticky border radius, which is kind of cool. When things are touching each other, they'll kind of glue together. Again, this is just a styling thing you turn on and off, but I think that's pretty cool. It just gives it a nice, more cohesive look. Okay, cool. We got a title. We have our grid. Let us get those states. So, where is state? All right, let's drag state out. Nice. We're going to put it over here. And I can use WASD to move stuff around. I can also use Shift WASD to make stuff bigger or smaller, which is cool, which means I can do stuff with my mouse while I, do stuff over here with the keyboard, which is pretty neat. Let's actually make this column a little skinnier, make this column a little fatter. Again, I'm just using Shift WASD and clicking on stuff. Cool. All right, now I want to get some graphs. So you can totally, write your own graphs. You can do all kind. Like I said, there's a whole. You use Vega. You can use all kinds of stuff here. But I like this idea of, much like the SQL, much like the drag and drop, to get basic SQL and then tweaking it as we go, which is kind of like the whole idea here, right? Like I have this generated SQL, and it's 80% there, and then I can edit it and tweak it and get to where I want. And that's kind of like what I want. Let's make the easy things easy and the hard things possible, right? To badly paraphrase Alan Kay. I like this idea of generating code. No magic, no wizards, no crazy bullshit in the background that's like opaque to the user, but do actions to generate code that then the user can then tweak to get what they really want. And not only does it give them like tons of flexibility and hackability and like customization, but they kind of learn what things are that way. If you get code generated for you and then you tweak it and you see if it changed, or you broke, or you go back and you fix it, like you really get that kind of like mental model connection that is hard to do with tools that like just do magic for you. And I don't really mean that to be like derision, but it is kind of like, I don't know. Sometimes I wish tools were a little more transparent in what's going on, instead of just being like, hey, like, what's that Office Max button? Like, that was easy. Like, yeah, that's cool. We got stuff done, but I didn't learn anything. And when it comes time to do the next thing, like, I'm a slave to the easy button, right? And you don't really want that. Again, I'm giving a speech here, but hopefully some of you understand what I mean. All right, so back to visualizations. So we want to generate code and have people change it if they don't want to write stuff from scratch, which they totally can do. But so how do you do that? Well, we have to have a Viz recommendation engine, and I use those terms loosely because it's completely user space. Like when you hear like a Viz recommendation engine, it sounds like some fancy algorithm that does a bunch of stuff, and like this is kind of that, but not really. Basically, I have a couple user configuration files that are used when the database is sniffed. It creates certain metadata, and then there's a middle layer one that defines attributes for that metadata. I'm going to show you this in a second, so don't fall asleep yet. And then a third one that says, okay, based on those two things, these are my Viz templates that can be generated. And then the system generates everything that fits, presents it to the user, and then the user can pick from that list. And what's cool about that is that you can modify anything. You can add your own custom viz. You can add a new, a new library or new different. Maybe you have certain visualizations or certain views that you want to create that are specific to your business process, right? That's totally cool. It's what it's for, right? You just write it in there, and then you have like, there's some special regional sales report that you want to suggest when people have region and this and that in their query. I mean, that's what this is for. So let's show that real quick. Let me go back to my configuration here. All right, so starting with the metadata sniffing. Let's go to sniff tests. Okay, so part of the metadata sniff when you add a database is things like this, and these are all user defined, right? I only have a handful of very simple ones. Distinct count, and you can see it's like using like pseudo fields, they get subbed in. Count distinct field from table as CNT, example value, max, average, sum, total rows. These are nothing crazy here, right? When things get more interesting is when we get to the field attributes. So we'll go to field attributes. You can see, okay, well, I have names for things. Oh, and by the way, like this is all defined in like SQL logic. If you know Honey SQL, again, a little more closure-y stuff here. These are basically where clauses, right? So for a measure, I have, it could be an integer, but not this, not that. And you can see you can get very specific here, right? For dimension, I have this thing that says, if the lowercase field name has sketch in it, because I was doing a demo and I had like this sketchy field, and I didn't want it to come up as a dimension, so you can just like add that. So imagine like the very specific metadata stuff there, the very specific business process stuff you could put in here to make sure that your users either don't generate things or generate the right things, right? when name is not like key, to see if something is a latitude or longitude. We have this very specific Phipps state code and Phipps county code, which is used for drawing like political maps of the U.S. Like when I say political, I mean like in terms of like the borders and whatnot. Zip code, some kind of esoteric stuff, right? Like very low cardinality, medium cardinality, reasonable cardinality, quote unquote. And that's useful in visualizations, right? Is the database ClickHouse? Does it look like a date? Again, you can put anything you want in here and then use this conditionally further down the line. So, back to viz recommendations. There's another configuration file here that is, let's go to a simple one. There we go. So basic H-bars. This is a Vega Lite chart. So basically we have three sections. So the axes. So these are the things we're defining that we think are interesting, right? So we want an X and a Y, and these can be named anything. It can be named cucumber. It doesn't matter. It's just basically we're defining things that we use in the query and the view. So in this case, we're saying X needs to be a dimension and of reasonable cardinality, which is an attribute I just made up, which means like the dimensions, or the distinct values need to be less than like 100 or something, which is probably way too many for a lot of these vizzes, but that's you can see I've been experimenting with different cardinalities. And Y needs to be a measure, which in that case was something we can aggregate, a number, a decimal, a float, whatever. Okay, so this defines what is eligible for this visualization. So of all the combinations of all the fields in the table or the query, these are the ones that we pick to see if we can make a basic H-bar, which like I said in this case is Vega Lite. If this is satisfied, then we go down to this thing. We have to create a query, right? So then X becomes X field and Y becomes Y field, and we basically use it as a template system to build a query, from table, the pseudo name for this, whatever this incoming query is, which by the way is probably a big subquery, like a named subquery, grouped by X field, some Y field, and then when we get to the actual, it says library shapes, this is where we get to the actual view. The actual view like you'd see, in here or here. Same thing. We're just subbing in X field and Y field with the rest of the configuration. And there's some other parameters in here that we'll get to later. But basically, that's how it runs. Basically, it finds, do we have any combinations that fit this? If so, let's create the query, let's create the view, and present this as a out-of-the-box thing the user can use, right? And it's completely dynamic based on the query or table that we're talking about. So I have a whole bunch of these, Nevo, recharts, Vega Lite. I have some maps. You can build all kinds of stuff here, and I don't think I've even scratched the surface. Filters, drop downs, select buttons, anything that you can visualize, you can build a recommendation for. Which is pretty dope, and I haven't really scratched the surface of this. I've been busy trying to get this whole thing out. But there's some really, really cool shit you can build just with this, right? And just having users that like want to drag and drop stuff, they want to get a reasonable thing. Like I said, the 80-20 principle. Like, how many of us have like walked into Tableau shops? When I started working at Facebook, I was like, oh my God, it's they have Tableau and like it's going to be full of like amazing stuff. And no, it was all like random horse shit. And that's not to shit on Tableau or anything, or excuse me, shit on Facebook, but it's like the things that people make in visualization tools are always like, a lot of it is just like, hey, I just want to see this line and this thing and whatever, and then move on. Because think of it this way, this is like answering questions. It's not all art. I don't want to denigrate myself here. But a lot of people just want to get shit done, right? And the easier you can make that, the better. And then the people who want to do more than get shit done and make like beautiful, awesome, data science, interactive, like workbooks, like you can support those too. But that 80% of people that just want to see a line graph for a thing so they can tell their boss another thing, like just make that quick and easy for them. And if you can build custom stuff to make that even cooler, like dope, like do that. But Anyway, so yeah, so this is the VisReco configurations. I can't say VisReco. It's what it's called in code. Visualization, recommendation, call whatever. I should probably come up with a better name. It kind of sounds kind of ridiculous. Anyways, it's kind of a really long preamble. But here's our table. We have this little icon here. We have a bunch of little icons for query. Refresh, deep metadata, which we're already doing by default since it's a small table, which means you can see the distinct count of each field, which is really nice to see, the literal cardinality just in the header. And then we have this third one that says down here in the bottom, shapes, regenerate all possible viz combos for this query. So it's going to take all these fields, like I mentioned, look at their data type, look at what they are, go to the VisRecos thing, look at the attributes, and see all the matches it can make. I should have clicked it before I started talking. And I click it, and it's running. And that's a query notification. I should probably turn those off, so that's going to get annoying, but it's spinning, it's running. There's two icons next to it, export CSV, and this other one is detect dimensional outliers. Those are both kits, which is a kit is a rabbit term for basically a plugin, like a user space plugin. So there's a lot of stuff in this tool that is not hard-coded and is completely editable and writable from the user perspective, which is kind of like what I want. I want people to extend tools and make it very specific to their use case. But we'll get to kits in a minute. Maybe not in this video, but soon. Okay, it's done. I don't know if it popped up. If you saw it, it said like I found 600 or something. Let us see this little icon here is our little viz icon. If I click on it, it will show me what it found. And what's kind of dope about this is, let me get rid of you. What's extra cool about this is that these previews are querying the actual data source, right? So if I had a filter, I haven't built a filter yet, but if I had a filter, I could filter it and see these all change. And that's a lot cooler than just having like a thumbnail of like a representation or like some half-ass like version. Like this is literally what it'll look like. So we have two pages. What it does first is it picks what it thinks is the top combination for each viz type. Because if we're looking at 600 different visualizations, it's going to be tough. This is a fresh installation, so it doesn't know anything about my user patterns. If there are certain things that I picked all the time, there's a very light kind of machine learning algo that will try to surface the best ones, but that's something that I'm going to work on and make a lot better. There's a whole lot of that can be added on here for great benefit. But for now, it's more of like a frequency thing. Anyway, so here's our vizzes based on based on those templates. We'll look at page 2. We've got a tree map, we got a heat map, we got some pie charts. Like, I see recharts, Vega Light. Here's recharts HBar. That's kind of what I want. But let me look back here again real quick, and that's all Vega. Yeah, I'm going to use some recharts HBars. Now, as I said before, these are the top choices of each type. If I double click on a group by, it'll show me all the vizzes of that group by. If I double click on a viz type, it will show me all of the combinations inside that. So if I recharts HBar, if I double click on this guy, it'll filter to, once it loads the data, to run a lot of queries here. Okay, so for recharts HBar, for this particular viz configuration, these are all the different dimensional aggregations that it found, right? Which is great because it's the fact you're going to find what you're looking for is pretty high. So let's see here. I want season. We'll just drag this out over here, and I want class. I'm going to drag this out over there, and there's that query pop up again. I'm going to disable that in a minute. And then I also want year. I don't see year. I'm just going to grab something else real quick so I can show off another fun thing. So we're going to grab county, even though it's not what I want. Okay, we have some stuff. Cool. I'm going to go and make this small again. And while this is cool to see the execution times, I'm going to turn that off. So if I go to config EDN, you can see show query times. I'm going to change that to false. And what's great about all these configuration files is that, I'm kind of impatient and I don't want to have to restart the web server or restart the server or anything. So anytime this config is changed, if you go down here, you'll see a notification. Server config is updated. The update has been pushed to my client, and it's now updated, which is great. So no more query execution times will be popping up now. All right, so remember I said that I picked this county bar even though it's not what I want. That's because there's another side effect of the viz reco process. So if I open up the editor for this viz, we can see here's the query generated, county and then rows, which is all based on the template engine kind of. And you can see from query Bigfoot sightings drag 9, which is auto-generated names. You could name them yourself, but for now, which is this main table, right? So it's using that as a subquery. So it's a child query of this main table, which is what we want. And if I go to the code, I can see I got a recharts chart, some Hiccupy stuff. I could go and scrub some things and change it, whatever. But this is not what I want. I don't want county. So I could change the query and I could change the viz. That's not a big deal. But you see this little tab called viz gen. Since it knows that this was an auto-generated viz of a certain type, I can click on viz gen and it'll let me look at all the other different combinations of this, right? So we have by county, I could say by season, and it'll change the query and the viz to do season, or month, it'll change it to be month, right? So even though I didn't select this, I can go in and change it as I want. And I don't know if you can tell when I click on it. You didn't see it there, but as I change the query, we can see the highlighting in the parent query, showing that the fields they use. Because again, it's all like lineage. All the SQL stuff is basically, parent-child. So fixed year. This is what I think I want. I want fixed year. It's a little messy, but that's fine. So cool. So we got our visualizations I wanted, the 3. This is kind of messy since there's some crappy data in there. We'll do another video on using flows and ETLs to clean it out, because if you saw the videos, I have a whole flow system built into this bad boy. But more on that later. So I want to filter this stuff out. I'm not going to do anything super fancy. Let's go to the query, and I'm just going to say, actually, no. If I want to filter the years out, I'm going to go to the parent query and filter out there, so they'll all get the filter. Excuse me, they'll all get the proper data. So I'm just going to say where fixed year is greater than 1900. And yes, these are strings, but that shouldn't really matter. And then fixed year is less than, because it should still order properly. I'm getting messages. 2025. So if I say where fixed year, because fixed year is a string field, if fixed year is greater than 1900 and less than 2025, that should filter out some of the crap. And cool, we lost about 70, 80 rows, but there we go, nice. So we have some much better looking years here. I'm not sure why these are. I'll have to look at this. I have to look at the style of this in a second. All right, sweet. So that's filtered out. Speaking of filters, let's do filters. All right. So something that I'll do an example with another subquery. So filtering and having interactive actions is something I'm huge on. A huge part of this system is everything is a reactive parameter. And when I say reactive parameter, I mean whether it happens on the server or the client. The server and the client share this kind of pool of values that have, keyword references, like parameter. It could be query name dot, slash field, like whatever. And when anything changes, everything cascades and refreshes to see it. So kind of like you do like a Tableau action, but not quite as convoluted, a lot more direct, since I'm directly manipulating SQL and rematerializing, re-rendering. So let's just say, for example, I threw out this class group by, right? And you see I'm clicking on the fields here. Oh, and that's the other thing. You can click on anything, because I love clicking on stuff. And what clicking on stuff does, it generates parameters. I don't have to say it's a parameter, because everything's already a parameter. How's that for my sales pitch? So, all right, as I'm clicking around, I don't know if you noticed that over here we have the parameters being shown. I don't know why I'm lagging out a little bit. Maybe it's a webcam. So we see Class A, 2467. As I click, the parameter changes, and we have it here. So this is a parameter. I can drag it out on its own, and what it'll do, it'll just be a string that says the parameter, right? Pretty straightforward. If we look at it, we'll see it's just a box that renders a thing, and its string it's turned into a string. And as you can see, as I hover over it, it highlights the block and it highlights the parameter. And it's class drag 10 class because it's from this thing. Now, I can also go into this and drag it in, and you can see everything that is compatible with this field lights up. Where equals, where doesn't equal, highlight, heat map. We have conditional formatting, which is something that I wanted. Easy conditional formatting, which I wanted for a long time on other tools. We have rudimentary. We can make rudimentary Vega light graphs this way, but I generally don't do that. Where, highlighting, etc. But this, if we look at our lineage, so this guy is a child of the parent table, right? So if I were to take a value from here and filter this, I'd also be filtering myself, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but you don't always want that. So what I would do is I would take this group by and I drag out itself, and then it's a little scrunched again, alpha. There's some options here, and one of them is promote query, because it knows that this is itself. So basically, if I promote the query, it'll fully materialize all the subqueries underneath it, all its parents and grandparents. So that way, when things happen to this, it means nothing will cascade to this, right? So if I go back to my lineage, you can see the only thing it's attached to is it's not really a child, but this is its parameter, right? Because it's related, but it's no longer related to its parent table, which means I can filter it and not worry about it cascading back to me. So now, sometimes you might want that, but in this case, I don't. So class B, we have a parameter, and then easy peasy, I drag it and say I want this parameter to say where this equals, that equals. And since all my viz are all children of this children of this query, when I change it, they all change because they're all subsets of this main query, including the state. So C is not a whole lot in class C. I guess in Bigfoot parlance, class C is like, giving Bigfoot a fist bump or whatever, so not a whole lot of those. But yeah, so I changed the dimension. It changes all the things. So it's something you want to do a lot, and I want to make it easy as possible. Another thing is that, like, where's the all option? Well, there is no all option. Just unselect the parameter, and everything will come back. Because if you notice, when I unselect the parameter is gone. It's not set to null, because if it was set to null, then we'd only be looking at null things. So another thing I want to just make super easy. If I go to the SQL code, you can see down here, so where my fixed year thing I put, and then it says when, it's a little bit of pseudo DSL here, when this parameter exists, class equals this parameter, right? Kind of like you would in a SQL template. A lot of times people say like, if this thing equals that thing, or else 1 equals 1, right? Something to just short circuit it and show everything. But in this case, we don't have to, because I can just say asterisk when, and then this gets processed before the query gets sent to the SQL engine. So we're kind of cheating a little bit, but hey, you're going to tell me like Tableau doesn't cheat with their SQL foo? Come on now. All right, cool. So that's a filter. You can have a whole lot of these. They can affect a whole lot of things and go all over the place. But I'm not actually going to use this one. So what we're going to do is we're going to just erase this guy. And this guy too. Just get a drink, do a lot of talking. No, excuse me. Okay, great. So I actually want to put this down here, and put this maybe here, and I'm going to make this guy a little more slender. And we'll put the seasons right next to it. Let's, I don't know about this blue color. Let's go back. I'm going to save this real quick just in case something bad happens. Save it to the server. Oh, I know what that was. Okay, we're back. I literally crashed it by saving it because of a bug in in the library, but the one that you use to take screenshots of DOM elements is super buggy, so that'll be disabled later today. But onward, basically. So we're back where we were before. We have our charts here. We got a little space to fill up here, so we'll do a row count just because that's fun. I didn't have that in my original drawing, so I expected this to take up more space, but it is what it is. We're going to rename that to sightings just because, so sightings. Cool. What else can we do to fill up the space? I didn't do, I'm sorry, I didn't do the year viz. Let's throw that back in there. And like I said before, like you can pretty much throw in any one and just reconfigure it. You can also, if you don't like this interface, there's another interface for looking at the recommendations too. If I go back to my editor panel and I click on, let me hit escape. Hitting escape will unselect the thing you're selected. Hitting escape a couple times will bring up this screen which shows key bindings, and is also a cool way to like look at client stats or server stats or reactor stats. Reactor is the parameter, is a server parameter system. Lots of cool stuff here. But basically hit escape a couple times and you'll see the key bindings. Left click, middle click, undo, redo, all that stuff. But like I said, viz recos. So if you've run a viz recommendation on a query, you can go to the editor panel and click on this, and this gives you a little more easier to control way to search for stuff, right? Like I could pick a very specific shape, and it'll show me all those. I can filter on just, hey, I only want to see the basic H bars that contain the field county, right? And it'll show me all those, which apparently is just one. all possible fields. Just kind of like an easier way to browse things, or you can see them as like a tabular grid and drag them out this way. Click on them and it'll preview over here, wherever that is. Lovely. Another reason why you want to check cardinality when you're making graphs, because that just ain't cool. But anyways, this is another way to browse the recommendations that isn't inside the query itself. But I think the query one is fine, basically. But if you want more UI, sweet. What was I doing? Oh yeah, we want to make this graph here a yearly graph to get back to where we were before I crashed everything. And we'll change it to fixed year. And sweet. Alright, we want to make this guy a little more squat. And these guys don't need to be so big. Honestly. We'll bring this over here. Again, like I said, this is going to be a long form video. Oh, that's not good. Bring this up there. We got our account. Sweet. What could we put there? Another thing that's kind of neat that you can do in the system that I always wanted to do is with all these different grids, having the concept of like cells is cool. So if I create a new view and I select a value, like for example Washington, right? I can drag this out, and if I say text, that'll show Washington, but it's not actually linking to Washington. What it's actually doing is saying, let's look at the parameter. It's looking for state drag 1, field state, row 0, right? Which seems innocuous, but then we realize if you have queries that have things like, let's say like metrics or top whatever, you have this, Washington, like if I were to like filter this a different way, see it's highlighted in red to show that it's being referenced here. This is just a cell reference, so no matter what this is, it'll show the top row, which, I have some server stats. I use this a lot in, I have a server stats dashboard that I use this in. Let's just open this real quick. Just as a quick example. So what we have here is, you see this thread count, recent messages. This is kind of a performance log that keeps accruing and ordered by descending. So when this gets updated, all these get updated because they're just call outs of specific cells of this query, right? Which again sounds like a simple thing, but can be super handy when you want to have the detailed data and also big call outs that are related to their position in a grid. Oh, I'm like moving my hands around, the camera's not even on. All right. So what we'll do here is, just for the hell of it, you wouldn't do this in a regular dashboard, but we'll say whatever, most seen in Washington, and we'll make the font size something literal, like that's a little big. Whatever, just go, and we'll see once we start filtering things, you'll see that changes. All right, so filters. So I kind of want all these to be filters. It's going to be tricky for them stepping on each other's toes, but I think that's okay since it's kind of more of an exploratory dashboard. So let's see. First we'll do, and obviously when I click on a bar, it's going to create a parameter because I love parameters and everything's a parameter. So this should be doing class A, class B, sweet. So we're going to say class and go to our main query and say where. We're not going to promote anything because I want them all to filter, because I can easily filter back. So everything should be Class B. See 2400. If I click on it again, we'll be back to full steam. I'm going to click on fall. We're going to add that to our filter set. Fall here, and then where equals. Sweet, and then that should do the same thing. And it's changing the years as well. Winter. And see, most seen in Florida in the winter. It changed this, and this is just the reference to the top cell. We should be able to do combinations. Like I want to see all Class Bs in summer. In only New York. Oh, we didn't set that as a filter yet. So New York, we will say state. That's also a filter. And we have 28, and this is our 28 New York sightings. So, all right, let me undo all these filterings. And we should be back to, that was Class B, so back to this again. And we're still in Class B. Okay. That's another easy thing. So all the parameters will show up in this bar here. So if people ever get lost, you could always create your own reset filters button because you're just clearing parameters, but they're also available right here. So you can just literally just wipe them out. Okay, this is fairly pedestrian, but I want to do something kind of interesting here. So let's give ourselves a little bit more space. And we'll make this guy small since it's kind of pointless. And we'll do over here. So what I want on the right hand side here, let's make me a little smaller. What I want to have here is if I click on a specific sighting, I want to see the details of that. So what we'll do is I'll select this query. I'll create another tab, and we'll call this sighting details. And I'll bring up the tab, which is still selected from before. Let me click on a thing, and it's not on this tab, so it's not going to show up here. So I have to unselect that. And what I want to do is pull out the parameters that have the sighting data. This is all like, let me. I didn't pin my stupid camera dealy. Oh, and I didn't select the thing again. We're all kinds of confused this morning. All right. So, as I was saying, I want to pull out the specific things to look at. So let me pull out environment. Again, these are scraped from the web, so this is the data is actually kind of awful, but it fits the observed. So observed is the field they use for the actual sighting information. So we drag those two things in, and these are just parameters, right? String, Bigfoot sightings drag, environment, Bigfoot sightings drag, observed. Nothing super crazy. Let's make it actually small so I can read it. That's a little too small, but hey, we'll do this. We'll make 22, since this should be like the description of what the weather was and the environment was. And we'll make this guy a little bit more. I don't know if they got stripped out. I don't know if they got stripped out in the scraping, or if the people that typed this shit in just like Redditor style, just never use carriage returns. But hey, whatever. If that's your thing, God bless. All right, so now we created this is a separate tab called Citing Details. So I'm going to go back to my main viz here, and I'm just going to drag in this whole tab. And it's actually still a little big. So I'm going to go back and mutate this a little bit. It's that's a lot of text, bro. All right. So cool. If we go back here, this should be, and now I'll have to artificially match it because it's just a container. So this is kind of cool because I've always wanted to have separate chunks, or if you have a dashboard with certain, like let's say you had like a whole set of filters, it'd be nice to have them as their own thing so they can be edited independently and then used in one or more other tabs that filter things, because like I said, parameters are pretty much global. So if I filter something here, it's going to filter across everything else in the dashboard. So this is my, and notice it doesn't matter where I put it anywhere, and when it gets dragged in, the system just says, okay, let's find the edges of this thing and dump it in there, which is nice. So now we have that. Sorry, all the talking. So now, since these are just parameters, when I select things, they just change because they're just looking at the data I clicked on. Cool. If I unselect, there's nothing. So what can we do with that? Well, let's make another tab, and we'll call this county data. Let us go back here. We will, what's the best way to do this? I know. All right, we're going to go back into, we'll just select this guy. We'll go to county data. We'll bring up the editor. And let me drag in county to get a group by. And let's see, what else can we add to this that's state related? Again, this will all make sense in a second. So we have county. Maybe we'll just stick with county for now. All right, so we have county data. Make this a little bigger. I think you can see where I'm going with this. So citing details is our detail. This is county data. I think that's the right size. So what we're going to do is we only want to show county data when somebody has clicked on state, right? So if I click on Ohio, everything should go Ohio. And then let me go on the parameters here. And Ohio, I'm going to copy this parameter name just so I don't have to remember it by clicking on the little copy icon. I don't know why that became the copy icon, but hey, it is what it is. I'm going to unselect that so we have everything back again. I'm going to go to my citing details, and this is just a reference to another tab. So if I open it up to edit it, I can see grid citing details. So I'm just going to say, using more DSL kind of like pseudo code here, if state is selected. And again, this is like the kind of stuff that seems really simple, but a lot of other tools don't allow you to do it easily. Like I want my things to be dynamic and changing as I go. County data. And a lot of tools you have to do lots of like hacking and hiding stuff. Well, I mean, this is built to do this kind of shit, so there's no need to like hack it. So okay, so we have that covered. So we have details. We have details. If I click on a state, we have county data. Cool. You could just as easily have anything I click on here. I can create a combination of a conditional. And actually, let's we'll do. Yeah, because if I'm not clicking on stuff. Well, for now, that's fine. I was going to do another case that if I click on one of these, it'll show something else. But I think people get the kind of gist here. One thing I wanted to mention is that I'm on this this dynamic theme, right? Which you're probably not going to use, but it makes a good point to show off the theme system. So up here, I have a parameters tab. So on the left here, these are all like kind of like local parameters to the screen. I mean, this is all like local, but these are like generic parameters that can be anything. And this is the theme. So these are all theme things. If I click on Scrubber, we could see tons of colors and fonts, and some of these are references. Like see, it says Solver, Colors of the Moment, Colors 1, Color 2. These are server references to the flow that changes the colors and the wallpaper that I set up. That what all this is hinging on, right? So Rabbit works in a system of like a pub sub system of parameters. Like so, there are parameters that exist only on my screen, and then get mirrored to the server, and then there are parameters that live on the server and get pushed to any screens that use them. So if there's a server parameter like this, solver, colors of the moment, and colors of the moment is just a function that's running, it's a solver, right? Which is just either a flow that runs or a function that runs, something that produces a value that gets triggered by something else, right? Because anything that's a value we can use and we can reference. And I'll show you an example of that in a second too. Since this is going along anyways, I might as well talk about a whole bunch of stuff. So if you're still here, bless. So this is just a reference to colors. Like for example, Pop 1, Pop 2. These are just various colors I have, references, editor, grid size, font size. You can see the whole UI is controlled by the theme, which means you can have a dashboard that themes everything, essentially. Obviously, including the background, including all the filters, all that kind of stuff. You can make it as official and businessy, or as crazy and weird as you want. And a lot of people get turned off by all my weird settings and stuff. But like I hope people understand that the fact that you can do that shows that you could do anything, which means you can have it look however you want. And if you want it to look like 1990s business casual or 2004, or you want it to look like business objects and be all white and like blue border lines, like that's totally cool. Like do that. I want you to do that. And hopefully in the future when we have a more of a community repo of themes and stuff, there'll be a whole lot of stuff to use. Thankfully, since it's all just configuration files. All right, so I was saying, so we have this theme system. It applies to everything. It can subscribe to different things, dynamic things like the solver stuff. What I was getting at is, so we have a rotating theme, and we have this like hard-coded like blue color for our recharts, and it's just not super. I guess it fits this background a little better, but not super great. So if you had a system like this where you had like a given theme set and you wanted to change the colors, especially if they're dynamic, then let's do that. So just to double check, solver, colors of the moment. Okay, so that's where we're getting our colors. All right, let me go to a new tab. I'm going to open up the bar here. So you see the clover icon. So this is kind of like a little command line thing where I can spawn new blocks. I have clover. I can run closure REPL commands, which we're not going to get into today, but that's a whole bag of worms. Fabric, which is an AI framework where I can have Fabric modify the canvas and change things for me. Shell, run shell commands, like who am I? And it gives you my Unix username back. random stuff like this Chuck Norris thing I use as an example. Create image. This is an OpenAI pipeline for generating images from text. But let's just go back to Clover for now. So we have that solver colors of the moment thing, and I want to get a color out of that. But let's say I don't quite know what my keys are. I don't quite know what the deal is. So I'm going to write Clover. So when I say Clover, I mean the DSL that all the views use, right? So I'm going to say data viewer, since that's a component in Clover. And then I'm going to say solver colors of the moment. And then hit enter. And it creates a view for me. And you can see that's the view. And colors of the moment is a server parameter it's resolving. And it's showing me what that is. And in this case, it's a map of colors that is used in the theme. So I want a better color for these recharge bars. So let's see here. Yeah, let's go with the contrast. So we'll go with most contrasting is this. So we'll drag out this key. And you see down here, sub to solver, colors of the moment, most contrasting. Again, just by me referencing the keyword, the server will now push me any new updates to that value, just like this whole thing. So if I go to this and I open it up, I can see, solver, colors of the moment, most contrasting. I'm just going to copy this. And if I wanted to click on this, I could get, you see the auto complete will show me all the other like child keys, but I just want to like I said, most contrasting. We'll just keep it there for now. So now that I have that key, I can go back here, go back to my recharts, and say the tooltip. We'll do. Let's see. Instead of having stroke and fill, we'll do stroke as the main color, right? So that should change the stroke to that pink color. And then we'll do stroke width 4 to make it thicker. And then for fill, I'm going to do string, I'm going to do the parameter, and then I'm going to do like 13 to give it some like transparency. So we have, it's a little bit too much transparency, but we'll do like 30, 35. Cool. So now if we let's just highlight stroke width and fill. Now, I can't make that a parameter because it has rows in it. But anyway, so now if we go and I'll change all these guys. And you can have this whole, let's say this is my tooltip config. You could have this entire map as a parameter, and then just use that parameter for each, thing. You could have it parameters configured in the VisReco section. Like you could reuse all this, but for this example, I'm pasting it in just because. It's a handful of keys in a map. It's not a big deal. And now they're dynamic. Go back to this. Stroke and fill. Sweet. You know what? I'm gonna take down the width on that because it's just a little too chunky for those small bars. That's fine. Whatever. So now we have colors that are more in line with the theme, and they'll change when stuff gets changed. So that's kind of cool. It's clear in California. You know what? This should really override that, but if I was going to do this for real, I would say the details should always override that, because if I'm drilling down into California and classes and stuff, like if I want to see, like these 30 Class C sightings, I really want to see what they are. loud howls and frozen lakes and whatnot. Like it's all good. So what else can we do since we're here? Well, maybe we want to hear Bigfoot. So I think it's called. I have a file that I downloaded, so I can use this play click component, assets, and I think it's called Florida howl.mp3. Yeah. And well, let's try that again. I'm going to recreate this block so I can steal its formatting. This will make sense in a second. So instead of removing the whole block, I'm just going to replace the string with this, so we get the nice coloring and whatnot. Yeah, so we can get the styling of the main thing. And this is just a silly example, but obviously we have text to speech, we have speech to text. If you have an OpenAPI key or an 11 Labs key, we can do all that. This is an MP3, so I should be able to just play this. I mean, it kind of sounds like wolves, but who am I to say? I'm not a Bigfoot research expert. So, that's kind of cool. You never know what kind of like mixed media stuff might make sense in a dashboard. Like here we have a random quote, and I can just wrap this with a speak tag. I don't think you can hear that. I didn't hear it. But anyways, you get the idea. Maybe I didn't put my API key in earlier. What else can we do since we're here? Let's open up the side panel tab. Oh yeah, talk about subscriptions. All right, let's go to a new tab. All right, so a flow is a thing that can generate values and do work, right? So let's go to a random wow. So this is a flow that hits the URL to get a random Owen Wilson quote where he says wow, right? It's like, wow, that's his thing. Super basic, but each step does a thing and it sends its results to the next step. And there's a lot of these like flow-based, and anyone who's on ETL has seen tools like this before. Completely arbitrary. A lot of these are doing just closure functions. Some of these are canned things, like the HTTP call is a canned element that's defined in the back end. But let me just play this. It makes the call, gets the results. It gets a random one. You see the character, the movie, the render. I'm rendering things. If it's a JPEG or a movie, like why not just render it, right? Here we have the wow. Wow. Great. But why is this cool? Because you can build anything this way, and then every single block here becomes a value that dashboards can subscribe to. So if this was like an ETL job or some very specific arbitrary thing, you can pull things from it. So you can build it in this view, and then your users can just kind of grab onto it by running it on the server. So this is not running in my browser. This is running on the server, and the value is being pushed to my browser, which is an important distinction, because a lot of things I do as little as possible in the browser because it can't be run headlessly, right? I want stuff to schedule and run, and I can't depend on browsers. That's like ridiculous. So for this, this is running it in kind of like editor developer mode. But if a user wanted to use this, they might just bring up this panel here and say, okay, well, which server flow? I'm looking for a random wow, and then they add it to this run stream box. And you can see it takes two inputs, and gives 12 outputs. So they can run it and they get new values. And then these values obviously are all like subscribable. So even the renderable views, like if I want to drag out the video block, or if I want to drag out the poster block, which are all defined in the flow, but when the user drags them out, they're pre-built items, right? And obviously I'm using silly examples, but I hope you can extrapolate this to other things, right? So now I've got these artifacts from my flow, and lo and behold, there's a play button here, but you know what? I could drag the play button out too, and now I don't even have to have this panel open. So this panel is a way of like reaching into flows. I can also send values to flows, which we'll do in a second. But now that I have the button, I can just hit it, and the server runs it, and we get new values, and they get sent to whoever subscribes. If another dashboard had subscribed to this, they would get those values too. And there's a lot of, and this block is literally just more Clover DSL. Run flow, this name, call it this thing, and override it if we want to override it. Again, parameter, reactive parameters. Wow. You know, and if I had these things referenced over here, I could kick off other runs. I could have this API values go to a SQL query, render another view. We can do all kinds of stuff. So once builders build flows, people can use them as like these visual functions, kind of. While we're on the story of the side panel here, I could go back to our dashboard here. If I click on a view with this open, so check it out. So this panel also shows history. So you can see every change I made to the code and what I changed and what it looked like before. And then I can go back to any one of these moments in time and show what was, changed. Like if I go, I don't know if I changed this too much. Yeah, but if it's a query, it'll literally run the query for that block and show you what was that card and show me what was there, which is pretty cool, because not only do I want, you have undo and redo and all that, but this is different. This is like, okay, a mutation happened of that object, and I want to see what it looked like before, so I can see what, if I want to switch back to that, which is super important. I think it is. So back to flows. So let's say we have a flow that has inputs, right? So let me get down on this. I'm going to do. So let's create a parameter first. Let's say if I middle click, it creates a parameter. By default, it's just a string, and I'm going to say. Actually, I can make it a, let's do it this way. What is it? Oh, we don't have the icon. I don't have the API key. That's why the thing didn't work, because I didn't have the API key put in. Shit. Okay, I guess I can't do that part of the demo. Fudge. Okay, well, we'll do another video on that. I was gonna do a voice input to a flow to create an image that we're gonna use somewhere else, but okay, we'll do another video on that. I forgot this is an out-of-the-box installation with no API keys. What I will do though is I mentioned earlier that there's a thing called kits, and a kit is a user space plugin, essentially. There's a dog under there. That can do all kinds of things. It basically can read all the data. It can basically look at every block on everyone's screen and see whether it's eligible, and then give it an icon and give it a description, and then give it a UI if it wants, and then run some arbitrary function on that piece of data, and then return some stuff. So I have a complicated thing here that, I say complicated. It's complicated in that the plugin itself is complicated. As far as the system goes, it's just running a kit. So you see this run a dimensional outlier analysis on a SQL row set, offline, not on the DB host. So basically takes this entire query, materializes it, puts it off somewhere, runs thousands of subqueries on it to try to find things in group bys that are off by standard deviation or by the average, and then presents that to the user in a way so they can help make better decisions, right? And this is just an example of a kit that I wrote that I think shows like some of the stuff that can be done here, right? So let me run it. So run it. I'm going to click it. It'll start. It has its own UI because, you know, I can pick which dimensions I want to include in this analysis. I'm going to say year, season, and this is all written in like user space. There's no like checking in code. This is all written in a configuration file. I'll show you in a second. State, we'll do fixed month, county, and we'll only do 4 at a time. And then I'll click go, and let's go over here to the kick panel. And this, as you can see over here, this is showing the actual output of the Clojure REPL that's running this code. And oh, that was fast. All right, and it returns this nice little exploration here. So we can see class C null for month. There's a lot of those. Let me try to find one that's a little more interesting. Month nil. We should have gotten rid of all the nils, but you know. There's a lot in summer. When it becomes especially interesting is when it's finding multiple group bys that have like, you know, nil unknown. It's kind of interesting. I can tell that I would want to filter a lot of stuff out. Class C. Again, Class C, California. When grouping by class and aggregating rows, these are values that are significantly above the mean. You know, 2.29 standard deviations. Again, on this small data set, it's probably not that interesting. But on some data sets with lots of dimensions, it's really interesting to see, like, hey, like on this day, on this thing, it's kind of like what they used to call in the late 90s and early 2000s is data mining, right? Finding combinations of things that are out of the ordinary. I'm calling it dimensional outliers, but maybe it's better to be called like, you know, 90s data mining. Month and state. There's, you know, more. Again, the sample size here is small, so this is not going to be great. If I had millions of rows, it would be a lot more interesting. And then you can go back here to see the console output of analyzing all the groups and all the values. But this can be anything, right? Like I have example kits that, you know, turn things into Lundbergs, right? I don't know if that's going to show up here, but oh yeah, here's one. Yeah, so it will show up after a second. So see this little coffee cup, and it says we'll take your view and replace it with a Lundberg. It literally just takes your view and changes it to a picture of the guy from Office Space, right? So if I run this kit, and it's custom user code that does whatever you want. And in this case, it did this, and it says, yeah, that'd be great. Again, stupid, but you can imagine the stuff you can do, because when it runs, it gets all the data of what it's running on. So you could theoretically do a whole lot of things. And then the theme changed, and our colors changed, and you know, cool. I didn't have I'm trying to think of what else I wanted to talk about without the API keys. Is kind of, oh yeah, and so this is a card level plugin, and this is a query level plugin we did with the outliers. Down here is a canvas level plugin. So these are like the levels that they operate on. The canvas level plugin can just do whatever it wants to the canvas. So if I do the Lundberg on the canvas, it should just appear somewhere. Instead of mutating an existing card, it creates a new card, which and here he is behind the graph, like a stately gentleman. Yeah, so this went on pretty long. I don't know if I'm going to edit it. It's kind of like cool to have these long things. Like the more we do, the less we'll probably have to like jabber on about. But yeah, so I mean, just as you saw in the beginning, we could make this whole dashboard in like 10 minutes if we wanted to, but doing all the fancy stuff and explaining things takes a little bit longer. But yeah, I like to think this is one of the more expressive tools out there for these kind of jobs. It's definitely different, and I'd love it if you checked it out. And if you got this far in the video, like, holy hell. Anyways, thanks a lot. I'll see you in the next one, and maybe we'll do some ETL and some data cleaning and some fun stuff. So see you next time. Cheers.